Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of AI Security Ops. This week, we're going to be covering something that has never happened before in the history of the AI industry. The US government ordered a company to pull its most powerful models off the market. Not just the chips that run them, the models themselves. On June 12, 2026, Anthropic abruptly disabled Fable-5 and Mythos-5 for every customer worldwide after they received a federal export control directive. The order barred any national, inside or outside the US, from accessing these models, which forced a complete shutdown. The models are only 3 days old, and this is the first time export controls have been aimed at an AI model rather than something like the hardware that runs it, and the implications run way past just Anthropic. But before we dig in, let's take a moment to talk about Black Hills Information Security. If you or your company are in need of any security services, whether that's external, internal testing, web apps, physical pen tests, wireless, social engineering, red teams, any AI security services, obviously, or maybe you need SOC monitoring services, check us out at blackhillsinfosec.com. Additionally, we have a training branch of anti-siphon training where many of our consultants take their knowledge that they are applying day in and day out, they package it up into an easy to digest, affordable medium for all of you to then consume and hopefully help you out in your career or your day-to-day life, or just learn something interesting and new. So check them out at antisyphontraining.com. So let's dive into this. Bronwyn, where did this order come from?
The order reportedly came from the Commerce Department, and the Commerce Department has to do with many, many different kinds of business transactions. So Secretary Howard Lutnick sent a letter to Anthropic CEO citing national security authorities. Now, the scope is what forced the full shutdown. The ban covered any foreign national, even Anthropic's own non-citizen employees. And so it's basically selectively blocking people based on citizenship. And it's even narrower. The directive itself is narrower than the shutdown that followed because it's targeting all foreign national access. So even if you're on a green card, you've been vetted, you've been approved, you've gone through all kinds of verification processes. As far as this order from the Commerce Department is concerned, it doesn't matter. If you are not an American citizen, you are not allowed to touch any of these Anthropic-created models, or I don't know if it includes supporting the software, but those models, both Mythos and the new one, Fable, you can't touch them if you're not a U.S. citizen.
Yeah, and so, I mean, obviously that's very difficult to enforce. And when they mention, foreign nationals too, then that even gets into the question, okay, well, does that apply to people with dual citizenships? Because, I mean, maybe they fall into that category. And so it sounds to me like that with how difficult that would have been for them, for Anthropic to implement on such a selective, narrow basis to try to make sure that they're not running afoul of the export control laws, which could land you in serious trouble, that they just said, okay, well, we're just going to shut it off for everyone. So my understanding of what happened.
Well, and what's also interesting is that they specifically used a Commerce Department regulation called Export Administration Regulations, or EAR. And this gives the Commerce Department authority over items that are considered dual use, meaning that they have both civilian application, but also military application. And we've been seeing and hearing more and more from the current administration about the possible military use and in their eyes, desirable military use of AI in the battlefield and in battlefield theaters.
Yeah, and so I think it's interesting from a couple different standpoints of where it's really interesting. So So you have the one facet where we saw the stories before where the government was getting upset at Anthropic because they wouldn't allow them to use their models for military purposes. They didn't want to remove the safeguards that were in place for that could prevent those things. So you have that one component. Then you also have Anthropic, who are touting that the Mythos-5, which is the less guarded model of Fable-5. So maybe we should just take a moment to talk about that. So for those that don't know, Anthropic released Mythos-5, or the Mythos model, which they said was their most cybersecurity capable model, had all kinds of implications and was too dangerous to release to the public. So they released it to select companies. So then they came out with Fable-5, which is basically the same underlying model, but it has a lot of safety classifiers in place where they try to prevent things such as cyber attacks and biological weapon attack. They just say biology, which is very broad. So it's funny because Anthropic has been touting that this model is really dangerous, that at least the Mythos model is really dangerous. The military is saying that they want the model to be dangerous so that they can use it. And now we're at this weird intersection where, where now that there's a kind of guarded version released, that the government has now said, okay, no, we believe you, this is too dangerous and we don't want anyone else to have it. I think that's interesting.
It is interesting. And it's also interesting that one of the reasons cited about shutting down access to both Fable and Mythos is the fact that both Fable and Mythos have been jailbroken. And this is of particular interest for anyone in the cybersecurity space, because even NIST admits that every large language model has an intrinsic flaw in that it can be social engineered and jailbroken. No matter how many guardrails you put in, it has to do with the nature of this technology itself. So there is no such thing as a universal jailbreak that will immediately jailbreak all LLM models. And part of the justification of this executive order is that shortly after it was released, shortly after Fable was released, people had jailbroken it. But this has happened with every single high-profile model that has been released ever. So the ground on which the Commerce Department is standing is super thin.
Yes. Oh, completely. There's the Pliny the Prompter's group Bossy that's been out for years now. And to your point, yeah, I mean, usually within literally hours of a new model being released, they release some kind of a jailbreak for it. So it's not unique to this. And what's really interesting is, so Anthropic says that with Fable-5, after releasing it, that compared to basically looks like maybe one of their previous models, one of their previous models had they said an offensive cyber attack success rate. So I'm guessing maybe using it for cyber attack capabilities of about 57%. And with Fable, they found that dropped to 5%. So it is arguably much safer than any of the other models that are out before and are still currently available from Anthropic themselves, not to mention all the other models that are out there, ChatGPT-5, GLM 5.1.
Well, and then there are all the obliterated models that you can get off of Hugging Face. So it's just like I said, the ground that the Commerce Department is standing on seems to be very thin. There's lots of pre-existing demonstrations that all large language models, regardless, can be jailbroken. So, and of course, it never fails. I don't see it in the write-up that we have here, but I believe that the order to shut down both Mythos and Fable came very shortly after intense conversations between the administration and Anthropic's number one competitor, OpenAI.
Yes, I don't think that those things are coincidental.
Looks like a duck, talks like a duck, walks like a duck.
Yeah, exactly. Follow the money, follow the conflict, basically.
Yeah.
And yeah, and find issues with it.
This
So
is really
uh,
we've been seeing the growing pains of AI as an industry. We've seen both government at all levels. They are all struggling to figure out what kinds of laws can they pass, what kinds of laws should they pass any laws at all. But of course, if they don't pass laws, they're not doing their jobs anyway. The whole discussion and debate can go round and around. The bottom line, this is just the first. This type of domain sovereigns and data sovereignty is going to become an issue more and more as we go forward, especially until things get to be a bit more stable in the technology itself. At least that's my opinion.
yep, yeah, I agree. So I guess talking about just kind of some going into some closing thoughts here, because we could go on for quite a bit of talking about whether or not these things should be treated as a weapon, munitions, anything of that nature. But I do think that one of these closing notes is kind of interesting, of talking about model redundancy, because this is something that we've talked about internally, where if you are only relying upon just a single hosted model for all of your tasks, that then becomes a single point of failure, right? So if something weird like this happens, where suddenly the model that you are relying upon, or maybe the entire company, goes dark, and your entire business model relies upon that particular AI provider, you're going to have some problems. So that's something that we all kind of need to start thinking about, in terms of having some redundancy. I don't think that it's feasible for a lot of companies, especially smaller companies at this point, to have the level of hardware to be able to like self-host some of the more powerful models. But hopefully we'll see that kind of change as these models get more optimized. Hardware hopefully becomes cheaper eventually. It's been expensive for a long time
Yeah,
now.
and it's
And
it's
kind of,
going to get more expensive before it gets less. And
yeah,
you bring up a really good
yeah.
point, because I know in the web development industry, one of the significant indications of maturing as an industry was when we started seeing fallover as a standard technical practice. We haven't seen that sort of thing in the AI space yet, but I expect as AI shifts from being a novelty to being more of a utility, that kind of redundancy where you have your first line set of servers and setup, and then you have a backup for if those should get overloaded or whatever. So that's something that, again, has not yet been developed, but is definitely worth thinking about, because it's a standard part of other technologies where software services are being delivered as a service.
Yeah, it's becoming so intertwined, that it's certainly going to become an issue, at some point, that we're certainly going to have to address.
And the dangerous technology issue, I mean, in the hands of a serial killer, a butter knife is dangerous technology.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I keep
Yeah.
getting back to it. It's really about responsible use. And that's where, as we grow with this technology, I don't see a need necessarily for licensing like we do with cars, but who knows?
Yeah. Well, and so I mean, yeah. I mean, to your point, like, tools can be misused, but obviously they also have a very practical purpose. So for us as a company, Black Hills Information Security as a company, we use this technology. We can use these technologies to really help our customers, to help find issues quickly so that they can fix them, to help increase their security posture. So at the end of the day, that's a positive. I mean, we as a company are not using this to go out and wreak havoc on the world. Quite the opposite. We're trying to help companies better secure themselves to prevent these breaches and to stay ahead of these different attacks for when bad people do leverage these for the wrong purposes, which is only a matter of time. And so, I mean,
They're
really,
already
I would
doing
say
it.
that they're already doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're playing
taking this
catch up.
technology away, I feel makes things less secure, makes things less secure, not more secure by taking it out of the hands of everyone.
Essentially, what the administration has done is it's forcing cybersecurity professionals everywhere to bring a knife to a gunfight.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Or people need to start building their own guns from scratch, essentially. I don't know.
that's a whole other thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
So cool. So I think we hit on some pretty good points here. Do you have any final closing thoughts on this?
no, it's get out the popcorn. Make sure you got lots of butter. It's gonna be a wild ride.
Yeah. Oh, it's going to be a very wild ride. I'm curious to see what happens. Oh. Well, if anyone else has any thoughts, always let us know in the comments, and hope you enjoyed this episode. And as always, keep on prompting.